to say you're a federal officer when you're not.
So now you call me a liar?
Can I see your badge, please?
You can look at it. See the picture there? That's me. When you call me a liar, you already lost credibility.
Okay, well, you are lying.
Okay, so now you call me a liar.
Yeah. Turn around, place your hands behind your back.
You know.
You're being detained. There's a kidnapping suspect.
The morning sun had barely risen over the city of Richmond. Traffic was light. Businesses were opening. People were heading to work. For most residents, it was just another Tuesday. But for Judge Elijah Brooks, it was one of the most important days of his career. At 8:30 a.m., he was scheduled to preside over a corruption trial that had dominated headlines for months. The defendant was a wealthy businessman accused of bribery, fraud, and political corruption. The entire city was watching. News crews had already gathered outside the courthouse. Lawyers were preparing their arguments, and Judge Brooks was on his way. Driving a simple black sedan, no escort, no security, no special treatment. That was how he preferred it. At 53 years old, Elijah Brooks had built a reputation for fairness and integrity. People trusted him, not because he was powerful, but because he respected the law. As he approached downtown, flashing lights suddenly appeared behind him. A police cruiser. Judge Brooks checked his speed. 40 miles per hour, exactly the speed limit. Confused, he carefully pulled to the side of the road. The officer stepped out. His name was Kevin Malone. 8 years on the force, a reputation for being aggressive, and today, he looked irritated. He approached the driver's window. License and registration. Judge Brooks calmly handed them over. Good morning, officer. Malone ignored the greeting. You know why I stopped you? No, sir. The officer looked at him, then at the car, then back at him. You crossed the center line. Judge Brooks frowned. I don't believe I did. The officer's expression hardened. So now you're arguing with me? No. I'm simply saying I don't think that happened. Malone stepped back, immediately suspicious. The calmness annoyed him. Most people became nervous during traffic stops. This man wasn't nervous at all. That bothered him. Step out of the vehicle. Judge Brooks blinked. May I ask why? I said step out. The tone had changed. People nearby began watching. A delivery driver slowed down. A woman walking her dog stopped. Judge Brooks slowly exited the vehicle. Officer, is there a problem? Turn around. The judge looked surprised. Excuse me? Turn around and place your hands behind your back. What for? The officer moved closer. Failure to comply. Judge Brooks remained calm. I am complying. Malone grabbed his arm. The situation escalated instantly. You're under detention. The judge couldn't believe what was happening. Officer, I have court in 20 minutes. I don't care. The officer tightened his grip. Judge Brooks looked directly at him. I'm Judge Elijah Brooks. The officer laughed. Actually laughed. Sure you are. A few people nearby exchanged looks. Something felt wrong. Very wrong. The judge tried again. My identification is in my wallet. Save it. The handcuffs clicked shut. The crowd gasped. Phones immediately came out. People started recording. Nobody understood why a calm, respectful man was being treated like a criminal. Inside the patrol car, Judge Brooks remained silent. His hands were cuffed. But his expression never changed. Years on the bench had taught him patience. Outside, Officer Malone called for backup. Minutes later, another patrol car arrived. Officer Sarah Jenkins stepped out. What happened? Malone smirked. Guy refused to cooperate. Sarah glanced toward the patrol car, then froze. Wait. What? I know that face. Malone laughed. You know everybody. Sarah kept staring. No. She suddenly looked concerned. Kevin, who did you say he was? He claims he's some judge. Sarah's face went pale. Judge Elijah Brooks? The officer rolled his eyes. Yeah, that guy. Sarah immediately grabbed her phone, because if that was really Judge Brooks, everything was about to change. Meanwhile, 3 blocks away, the courthouse was filling up. Reporters crowded the front steps. Television cameras rolled. Inside the courtroom, lawyers checked their notes. The clerk looked at the clock. 8:20 a.m. 10 minutes until the hearing. But Judge Brooks wasn't there. She called his phone. No answer. She called again. Still nothing. A third call. This time someone picked up, but it wasn't the judge. Richmond Police Department. The clerk froze. What? The officer repeated himself. The clerk felt her stomach drop. Why do you have Judge Brooks's phone? Silence. Then, Who? The clerk stood up so quickly that her chair nearly fell over. Judge Elijah Brooks. The officer didn't answer, and suddenly, everyone in the courthouse realized something was terribly wrong. Inside the Richmond courthouse, panic spread quickly. Judge Elijah Brooks had never been late, not once. In 23 years on the bench, he had arrived early to every hearing, every trial, and every important proceeding. That was one of the reasons people respected him. So when the clerk informed the courthouse administration that a police officer had answered the judge's phone, everyone knew something was wrong. Within minutes, the information reached the office of Chief Judge Robert Harrison, the most senior judge in the state. Harrison immediately stopped what he was doing. What do you mean a police officer answered his phone? The clerk repeated everything. The room fell silent. Harrison grabbed his coat. Get me the chief of police, now! Meanwhile, Judge Brooks remained seated in the back of the patrol car. His hands were still cuffed. Outside, Officer Kevin Malone looked completely relaxed. To him, it was just another detention, another traffic stop, another citizen who had questioned his authority. Officer Sarah Jenkins wasn't as comfortable. She kept staring at the man in the patrol car. Finally, she walked closer. Sir, Judge Brooks looked up. Yes? Sarah hesitated. Are you really Judge Elijah Brooks? The judge calmly nodded. Yes. The officer felt her heart sink. She had seen him before, not personally, but in judicial conferences, newspaper articles, and official state meetings. There was no doubt. This was him. She immediately walked back to Malone. Kevin, what? I think that's actually Judge Brooks. Malone laughed. You serious? Yes. The smile disappeared from Malone's face. For the first time, uncertainty appeared. You sure? Very. Malone looked toward the patrol car, then back at Sarah. No way. But deep down, he was no longer confident. At police headquarters, Chief Rebecca Morgan was reviewing reports when her phone rang. She listened for less than 30 seconds before standing up. What? Her assistant looked confused. What happened? Morgan grabbed her keys. Apparently, one of my officers just detained Judge Elijah Brooks. The entire office went silent. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Everyone understood the seriousness immediately. Because Judge Brooks wasn't just a judge. He was one of the most respected legal figures in the entire state. Back at the roadside stop, things were becoming crowded. More police vehicles arrived. Reporters had heard rumors. People continued filming. Videos were already appearing online. Millions of viewers would later see the same image. A respected judge sitting in handcuffs inside a patrol car. Nobody knew why. Then a black SUV suddenly pulled up. Chief Judge Robert Harrison stepped out. The crowd instantly recognized him. A second vehicle arrived, then another. Lawyers, court officials, senior government employees. The atmosphere completely changed. Officer Malone watched nervously. He wasn't expecting this. Chief Judge Harrison walked directly toward the patrol car. He looked through the window, then his face darkened. Open the door. Nobody moved. I said open the door. An officer quickly complied. Judge Brooks slowly stepped out, still handcuffed. The chief judge stared at the cuffs, then at Officer Malone. What exactly are you doing? Malone cleared his throat. Sir, this individual is being uncooperative. The chief judge looked at Brooks, then back at Malone. Individual? The officer nodded. Harrison's voice became cold. That individual is one of the most respected judges in this state. The crowd became silent. Even Malone looked uncomfortable, but he still wasn't ready to admit he had made a mistake. He refused instructions. Judge Brooks finally spoke. No. The calmness in his voice was impossible to ignore. I asked why I was being detained. The crowd murmured. Several reporters wrote notes. Malone felt pressure building. Then Chief Rebecca Morgan arrived. The chief of police stepped out of her vehicle and walked directly toward the officers. What happened here? Malone immediately began explaining. Traffic violation, refusal to cooperate, failure to comply. Morgan listened carefully, then asked a simple question. What was the traffic violation? Malone answered quickly. He crossed the center line. Morgan looked at him. You saw it? Yes, the chief nodded. Good. She turned toward another officer. Pull the dashcam footage. Malone's stomach dropped. 10 minutes later, everyone gathered around a police vehicle. The dashcam video began playing. The road appeared on screen. Judge Brooks's sedan could be seen driving normally. Everyone watched carefully. 5 seconds. 10 seconds. 20 seconds. 30 seconds. No traffic violation, no swerving, no crossing the line, nothing. The video ended. Nobody spoke. Chief Morgan slowly turned toward Malone. "Would you like to explain this?" Malone's face turned pale. The chief's expression hardened. "The vehicle never crossed the center line." Complete silence. For the first time that day, the officer had no answer. But things were about to get worse. Much worse. A detective approached Chief Morgan holding a folder. "Chief, what is it?" The detective looked uncomfortable. "We found something." Morgan opened the folder, her eyes narrowed. "What is this?" The detective took a breath. "The businessman scheduled for trial today. The corruption case?" "Yes." Morgan looked up. "And?" The detective continued, "We found multiple phone calls between him and Officer Malone." The crowd went silent. Malone froze. The detective continued, "Several calls over the last month." Chief Morgan stared at the officer. "What kind of calls?" Nobody answered, because everyone already suspected the truth. Judge Brooks was supposed to begin a major corruption trial that morning, and somehow, the officer who detained him had been communicating with the defendant. The realization hit everyone at once. This might not have been a mistake. It might have been planned. Chief Judge Harrison looked at Malone. "Tell me I'm wrong." The officer remained silent. "Tell me this has nothing to do with today's trial." Still silence. Reporters immediately sensed the story getting bigger, much bigger. This wasn't simply about a traffic stop anymore. This was becoming a corruption investigation. Chief Morgan ordered an immediate review of Malone's body camera footage. The file was uploaded. Everyone watched. The recording started. The stop appeared normal. Then they heard Malone's voice. And within minutes, the truth began to emerge. The officer wasn't reacting to a violation. He was looking for a reason, any reason. A reason to delay Judge Brooks. A reason to keep him away from the courthouse. The evidence was becoming impossible to ignore. But the biggest shock came at the very end of the recording. Just before backup arrived, Malone made a phone call, a private call, and the words captured by the microphone sent chills through everyone watching. "Don't worry, the judge won't make it to court today." The room exploded with disbelief. Chief Morgan slowly closed the laptop. Judge Brooks remained silent. The reporters stared at each other. And Officer Malone knew it was over, because now everyone understood the truth. The stop had never been about traffic. It had never been about public safety. It had been about stopping a trial. And somewhere in the city, the businessman at the center of the corruption case had just realized his entire plan was falling apart. The recording ended. No one spoke. The words echoed through the room. "Don't worry, the judge won't make it to court today." Chief Rebecca Morgan slowly closed the laptop. The crowd was silent. Reporters looked stunned. Court officials exchanged nervous glances. And Officer Kevin Malone stood completely still. His face had lost all color. There was nothing left to explain, nothing left to deny. The evidence had spoken for itself. Chief Morgan looked directly at him. "Officer Malone." He swallowed hard. "Yes, Chief." "Turn around." The officer froze. "What?" Her voice became colder. "Turn around." The reality finally hit him. For years, he had been the one placing handcuffs on others. Now everyone was watching as another officer stepped forward. The handcuffs clicked around his wrists. Several people gasped. The irony was impossible to miss. Only 30 minutes earlier, Judge Elijah Brooks had been sitting in handcuffs. Now the man responsible was standing in the exact same position. Across the city, news of the incident spread rapidly. Television stations interrupted regular programming. Social media exploded. Videos of the judge being detained appeared everywhere. Millions of people watched. But the story was no longer about a traffic stop. Now it was about corruption. Meanwhile, investigators worked quickly. The corruption trial was supposed to begin that morning. But after reviewing Officer Malone's phone records, detectives discovered something alarming. There weren't just a few calls, there were dozens. Text messages, private meetings, financial transactions. The deeper they looked, the worse it became. The officer had been secretly communicating with businessman Richard Kane for months. Richard Kane wasn't just any defendant. He was one of the wealthiest men in the state, a powerful developer with political connections and enormous influence. For years, rumors surrounded him: bribes, illegal contracts, hidden payments, witness intimidation. but nobody had ever managed to prove it, until now. At police headquarters, detectives obtained a search warrant. Within hours, they discovered large deposits of money connected to Malone's accounts. The numbers shocked everyone. Thousands of dollars, then tens of thousands, then even more. The evidence pointed toward one conclusion. Officer Malone had been paid. When investigators confronted him, he finally broke. Sitting alone in an interrogation room, he stared at the table. For nearly an hour, he said nothing. Then he looked up and confessed. Richard Kane had promised him money, a lot of money. His assignment was simple: delay Judge Brooks, keep him away from court, cause confusion, create enough chaos for the hearing to be postponed. Malone thought it would be easy: a traffic stop, a short detention, nothing more. He never imagined the entire plan would collapse before lunchtime. While the confession was being recorded, another team of officers headed toward Richard Kane's office. The businessman was preparing a public statement when the doors opened. He looked up. Several detectives entered. Their expressions told him everything. Kane slowly stood. "What is this?" The lead detective placed a warrant on the desk. "You are under arrest." The businessman stared at the paper. For the first time in years, he looked afraid. Outside, cameras captured everything. The powerful businessman who believed he could manipulate the system was escorted out in handcuffs. The image instantly became national news. People who had followed the corruption case for months couldn't believe what they were seeing. The man who tried to avoid justice had helped expose himself. Later that afternoon, something remarkable happened. The courthouse reopened. The courtroom filled again. Reporters returned, lawyers returned, citizens returned. And for the second time that day, everyone looked toward the entrance. This time, Judge Elijah Brooks walked through the doors. The room immediately stood, not because anyone ordered them to, because they respected him. The judge nodded politely, then took his seat. The courtroom became silent. Before beginning the hearing, Judge Brooks looked around the room. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then he addressed everyone. "Today has been unusual." A few people smiled. The judge continued. "The law was tested." The room listened carefully. "And when the law is tested, our response matters." He paused. "The purpose of justice is not to protect powerful people." Another pause. "It is to protect the truth." The courtroom remained silent. Those words would later appear in newspapers across the country. The corruption trial finally began. Over the following weeks, investigators presented overwhelming evidence. Financial records, witness testimony, phone records, bank transfers, everything pointed to the same conclusion. Richard Kane had built his empire through corruption. And when he feared accountability, he tried to interfere with the legal system itself. The jury deliberated, then delivered a guilty verdict. Months later, Officer Malone stood in a courtroom of his own. This time, he wasn't wearing a badge. He wasn't carrying authority. He wasn't giving orders. He was the defendant. The evidence against him was overwhelming: abuse of authority, obstruction of justice, corruption. The judge delivered the sentence. The courtroom remained silent. Malone lowered his head. His career was over. His reputation was gone. And the choices he made had finally caught up with him. After the trial ended, reporters gathered outside the courthouse. One journalist approached Judge Brooks. "Judge, after everything that happened, are you angry?" The judge thought for a moment, then smiled. "No." The reporter looked surprised. "No?" Brooks shook his head. "Anger doesn't improve justice." The crowd listened carefully. "What matters is accountability." The reporter asked one final question. "What lesson should people take from this?" Judge Brooks looked toward the courthouse behind him, then answered, "Never believe that power places someone above the law." He paused. "Because the moment that happens, justice stops being justice." The interview aired nationwide. Millions watched. Millions shared the clip. But what people remembered most wasn't the arrest, or the corruption scandal, or even the dramatic courtroom battle. What they remembered was the image of a man who remained calm when treated unfairly. A man who trusted the law even when the law temporarily failed him. And in the end, that trust was rewarded. Because truth has a way of surfacing, no matter how deeply someone tries to bury it. And on that day, justice didn't just return to the courtroom, it reminded everyone why it exists in the first place. The end.